And the Hustle crew is here to talk to you about extreme ownership and how you can use these tactics and techniques if you're a job seeker, if you're potentially looking to level up. This is our third conversation around extreme ownership, and I think we're all really excited to conclude the book. So everyone, please introduce yourselves. Harold, I'll start with you.
Hey, good afternoon. Harold Strong. I'm in Dallas, Texas, president of Medical Innovation Collaborative. We are a nonprofit focused on growing the life science ecosystem in the North Texas region. I'm here primarily because one of the pillars we're working with is around workforce, and to understand what that means and to kind of give people examples of outside their main scope is a wonderful thing. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Mike
Minoski from East Bay, Northern California. I get confused. I co-lead programs at the Wharton Business School in San Francisco in career development and job search. I'm also the director of coaching at a wonderful community online called Hire Club, and I'm a certified coach in private practice.
Love
Great
it.
to be here.
Allison.
Yeah, I'm Allison Jones. I'm a career counselor from Columbus, Ohio. I work at Ohio State University within the Fisher College of Business, and I help the MBA students kind of figure out, what do I do with my life? How do I get there? And I work with the employers that want to recruit them. And I also have a side private practice.
I love it. I love it. So diving right in, extreme ownership, the author broke it into 3 segments, right? Last week, we talked about the laws of combat, which we really took to view as how do you sustain yourself and maintain your own, mental strengths, energies, self-worth, etc., when you're going through this job seeker process. And this week, when we're looking at, the subject of sustaining victory, I really think this is where those who are looking to level up, maybe you're in a level and you want to go to a higher level. Maybe you're looking to present yourself to, your manager for a different opportunity. And so I really think there's a lot of content here that we're going to have a lot of fun with. And when we kind of think about all of the ways this author has taken us through ownership, right? And the extreme nature of it, everything comes back to the plan, keeping it simple, right? And we've all led large teams, large projects, international components. So I'm really curious, Harold, when you're leading teams, right? And when you think back to your days at Procter & Gamble, right? And you've shared with us that, Procter & Gamble starts everyone on this pretty consistent path, right? And then you grow into various roles in that path. How have you found that you've kept not only the messaging for yourself, but also for your team simple?
That's a good lead in, and this book is right in line with a lot of the training that I got at Procter & Gamble. I remember I was a sales rep in the packaged soap detergent department, and there were 7 steps of the call. Each and every store you stopped in, I really got sick of that part. Initially, your manager would walk through the store and count the 7, make the presentation, you get the features, the benefits, you handle objections a certain way, you get the order, you go back to your car, you fill out the order, and you move to the next, each and every day. And being a little bit of a independent thinker coming out of college, it was a challenge to be structured in that path. But that is the rest of the pathway in a career with Procter & Gamble, being disciplined, being responsive so that everyone else knows what to expect from you. Success is built on being able to do the same thing over and over and over again and guaranteeing that outcome. Even if you want to go to movies, great directors, great stunt people, great technical people are able to be successful at movies because they can do the same thing every time and deliver it on that point. So from this book's perspective, the thing that really got me going on this particular chapter was a phrase that he used, moving with a purpose. And so if it's really simple, I don't have to remember what I've done. It's built into my operational mind. It's just something I react to. It's simple. I can move with a purpose. And then there's a mission related to this purpose. And that mission is clearly communicated to the people that you lead, the people that are leading you, and the people that are champions of what you're doing. So long story short, the opportunity of moving with a purpose, keeping it simple. If it's complicated, you won't remember it. If it's complicated, you can't repeat it. And if I'm a publicly traded company, if it's complicated, I won't make that penny each quarter. So keeping it really simple, just drilling it into everybody that comes in, no matter the level. Maybe a lot of people like to hire promote from inside and move them up. But that would be my first pass at that conversation.
I love it. Thank you. So, Allison, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, and then Mike, definitely, have you fill us in. When you're advising MBAs on everyone I think enters their educational journey with what they think their plan is, right? And I'm sure Allison, Mike, you both can attest to that plan changes quite substantially, most likely, right? Life, opportunities, what have you. But how do you coach your students and your clients to be simple and stick to the plan?
Yeah, I think Harold is right on that. If you keep it simple, then it's repeatable and you'll actually stick with it. So whether that's keeping a very simple message that you're delivering during an interview, so that the interviewer remembers just those couple of key things about you, that's a really good way to to implement keeping it simple. I advise my students to go into interviews with just like 3 main things that they want to get across to the interviewer. That way they keep it in their minds. It's straight with the interviewer. It's so much easier that way. And then same thing with just their job search plan overall. It has to be a simple plan because then they're more likely to follow through with it. So even if the end goal kind of shifts, maybe you want different industries, different functions than what you originally thought, at least your process that you follow has to be simple. You know that with any new possibility you're thinking of, you're going to do 1, 2, 3 things and then move on to the next thing. It's got to be simple.
And Mike, when I was reading this, I really, I thought of you because, and you can probably say this better than I can, but I think sometimes people can get overly complicated. When you think about all the individuals that you have coached and guided, when are times that you've seen the plan get too complicated that it's not a plan anymore? It's just kind of a construct of all these ideas, and therefore very derailing to someone who's either looking to pitch themselves for a new job or looking to explore a new opportunity.
I think, you go back to what both Allison and Harold said. Having a plan means you have direction. It can mean multiple directions, but it means having a direction. One of the things that my work, both in my recruiting days and my coaching days now, has really been around, okay, let's create a couple directions. 5 or 6 isn't going to work. You're going to get yourself just locked down. You're not going to be able to move forward. Developing a couple paths of interest and then iterating those paths. Okay, I've learned maybe this is not a direction. Great. The other one looks promising. Let's go there. That people always have forward movement. And, that was in the book. And then the other thing is having, there's a huge industry around building dashboards. Small measurements. And the KPI that I like to give a lot of my clients, students, and everyone else is you should be involved in 3 to 5 dialogues a week around your career. Some of those are talking to a recruiter, solid interviews. Some of those are doing reach outs, building relationships with people that are in the industry that you'd like to hear their thoughts on. So having clarity up front, not precision, but clarity, having direction, and having small metrics. That's
I
really
love
the
it.
model.
Can I double click on that for a second, Mike? So
Yeah.
When you say have 3 to 5 conversations a week, so that really plays into the overall concept that we've all heard of, you have to manage your own career and you really have to keep it alive yourself. And some individuals say, oh, well, I'll interview once a quarter, I'll have this conversation once a quarter. So is this in your mind, you need to kind of keep, even if it's little bite-sized pieces, to keep everything moving, keep everything in balance?
Absolutely. If you're in a job search, the reason we say 3 to 5 is if you're actively working in a job search, 3 is probably realistic. If you're not working, 5. I've got people that have done 8. You want to be on the other side of that. But But the idea is that those dialogues are the core of your action. What you learn from them, if it's a casual conversation, oh, how would I, this sounds interesting. How would I proceed to show interest in your company? Great. Now you're progressing. That's the whole idea. It's a small metric, but it's an extremely powerful metric. After you start working, highly encourage you to continue a dialogue. You should never not be talking to people about the outside world.
That is such wonderful advice. It's so true. You take an offer and you get kind of pulled into that vortex, and then you either don't turn the light back on until, you're potentially looking for another opportunity. And at that point, maybe those relationships are stale and it's a little too late. Yeah. So one thing I'm really interested in, though, is the concept of, our author talks about communicating up and down the chain of command. Right. And the concept, that he talks about is, in battle, you have to make sure that everyone knows what they're going to do. Right. And that everyone has the, designation of authority or the empowerment to make the decisions they need to make. Right. But when you think about, and I'm really tapping in to, let's say I'm internal to a company and I want to explore a role internal to that company. And maybe it's a role higher than where I am now. Maybe it's in a different department. How do I manage that communication up and down the chain? Mike, I'd love to have you kind of take us through, where you've seen clients take it, good and bad.
So I think the people have done it well, because I always like focusing on, what is the best practice, is having the dialogue early. Even during an interview process, I encourage somebody who's on a cusp of moving forward to say, I'd like to be talking about career steps, career growth in your organization. You've laid the groundwork. What that does is that gives you the opportunity early in your, in the first 3 to 6 months to be able to go talk to a senior leader. I know a client of mine who reached out to her CEO in a multinational organization and who said, I liked your talk. She actually reached out to the CEO through LinkedIn. And they are now in dialogue. And it wasn't anything huge. It was just, you made a point about X, and that really resonated with me because of this. I appreciated your comment. And it wasn't a, mentor me, grow me. It was just simply, I appreciate what you said. That opened the door. And that should be the philosophy, is I don't necessarily want this person to promote me. I don't want this person to mentor me. Maybe I do down the road. What I really want to do is I want to create a relationship. I want to create a dialogue, and I want to learn, and we'll take it from there. We put too much on. I literally have seen people, and Harold and Allison, I know you've seen the same thing, where someone will reach out and go, can you be my mentor?
Yes.
It's a little heavy right up front.
And I think that brings, a great kind of topic within this as well. Harold, when you and I have had conversations, and like we've talked about, you've led a variety of teams at a variety of organizations, right?
Right.
Can you actually manage up? What does that look like? I feel like that's such the elusive, and I say it in the context of, you're managing up and leading down, right? How do you manage your leader? What's the way you found is most effective?
So before we go, Mike, I really appreciated what you were saying there. That's rich. That's very valuable. And it kind of ties into managing up. In a casual, non-engaged relationship, we're in the same company, but our paths never cross. But this is a senior VP. This is someone in the C-suites that I've been aware of. I think that person, he or she, is doing a great job. Thanks so much for your leadership in this space. Here's what I've benefited from, or here's what I've observed. Would love to have lunch or coffee. Let me know. But in a more engaged situation where there is a project or there is a deliverable attached to it, communication is key. And being able to communicate to your immediate leader so that he knows where we are. And I think the idea of including the mission statement of what this project is, so that people are aware, what are you doing and why are you doing it, right? So just start up. Here's what here's the project, here's the mission of that project, and here is what my department, here's what the people in my group have done to date to meet the timeline related to this. So this is a very clear, clean piece of communication that keeps everybody informed on what's going on without being asked. So now you can have a very meaningful conversation with your immediate manager, boss, director. But what that director will then do more than likely is share that with the person he reports to. So you don't really want to jump over. You want to go through, because now your manager looks really great at his management skills, so a feather in his or her cap. And then you come along as a key asset to any department that's there, because you're communicating, you understand what the mission is, there's no misunderstanding about that. And it's keeping it simple. Here's what we said we wanted to do, here's what we're doing, and here's the timeline toward reaching that goal. So in my head, that's what I think, and that's what I've experienced with trying to lead up and having people lead up to me. So it's like, whoa, didn't expect that. I was expecting to have to go and try to think the magic question to find out where we are with the project. But here it is on a sheet of paper. I can just press forward to the next group. So that's what I think.
And so when we think about, we have the plan, we're going to keep it simple, right? And then we think about managing up and down the chain of command, right? Then comes to this chapter that I thought was so timely for what we're experiencing now. And it's decisiveness amid uncertainty. And I don't know anyone right now that hasn't felt like everything that they thought was certain in life has been turned upside down. And Allison, I'd love for you to share, your thoughts on how you advised your MBA students. A lot of people come into, like we talked about, a program with a plan. This is what I'm going to do. The world has really been kind of turned upside down. How have you helped them keep their wherewithal and lead them through that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I try to help them see is it's not always going to be like this. This is awful. Everything that's happening is awful. And at some point, you're still going to be working towards your same goal. So if you try to keep in mind, like, you're playing the long game at this point. So it might take maybe a few more steps to get to that goal. That's fine. Just, keep your why, your mission in mind. And, whatever you have to do to kind of flex and change right now with the changing circumstances, do that, because at some point you can still get to where you wanted to get to. So, keep the faith, basically. You've got what it takes to get past this. Don't let it break you.
I love it. It's so true. We have to stay on point. Harold, when I was reading this, it actually made me think of you, because Nike has really been the leader of, railing against, uncertainty and leading the charge, with being different and really kind of showing up in these diverse moments and these moments of uncertainty. We were all kind of working remote under the backdrop of coronavirus that then turned into, now we're trying to figure out how to lead our workforces. I remember the day coming back to the office and the George Floyd video was everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you lead through that? How do you console through that? If I'm a leader, if I'm a new leader, right? Where do I find my footing?
That's a really difficult question now, because we're right in the middle of this. We are really challenged. The experience I had at Nike during that period is very close to the metaphor of sports teams. Next man up. And you are always competitive, but you're competitive with respect, right? So if you got the swoosh on, you're part of that team and everyone's pulling in the same direction. The objective is to be the majority product worn on the field to play on the weekend. You want to see more swooshes than any other logo that you may find. But the objective here is, again, communication. Any team has plays. You have to communicate to the other members of your team, removing left, right, or center. If we're playing defense, which defense are we playing? Any sport. So the challenge here is the communication piece. It's keeping it simple. It's the why, and it's being legitimate and honest to who you are and who you should be to that team. One person can't play all positions on the field, so that's making it much more complicated than you need to. So trust in your position, trust in your team, and move forward. Now, if there is a gap somewhere, okay, so let's regroup, let's huddle up, find out where the resources are necessary, and this is with everyone. Because right now, a lot of us are working from home, which is unique. You don't have that constant contact and friction with your coworkers, with your managers, and with the people that report to you. You don't have that ready access to that hallway conversation where, oh, I need to talk to you about something, and where we can kind of get together and work out a very informal plan. I haven't figured out how to bump into anyone on Zoom yet. That's not something that happens a lot. So now more than ever, you have to have confidence in yourself and your ability to communicate with the team and to express in no uncertain term, here's the status, here's the help I need, or here's the help I can offer. Probably we have another year and a half of this. Companies are changing their culture. They're changing a lot of the things that they're doing, but I think we just need to be honest and communicative.
Mike, one thing that I think was so, at least I found it to be very impactful, when coronavirus really rolled through the world, and it really had an impact here, in Silicon Valley. I mean, you had people whose offers were being rescinded. Mm-hmm. You had people who were geared up, they'd given notice of one company, they were going to another company, and then everything is put on hold. When you look back at your career, and you've had multiple careers, right? Which is incredible. How have you advised people to be decisive, still hold true to the plan, still keep it simple, still know who you are, even when there is this much uncertainty?
I think acknowledging uncertainty. You used a term earlier that was wonderful, console. When George Floyd happened, there were those of us who thought we understood. And I recognized very quickly from just a very few conversations with people I've known for decades, I didn't understand. And that was, for me, in many cases, heartbreaking that I didn't. Understanding my weaknesses, understanding my gaps, and learning to be comfortable with that. And I think that's part of dealing with uncertainty. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. What are my gaps? Harold laid out an absolutely beautiful methodology, but understand that in times like this, it's harder and harder for next man up. And so how do you accept that, all right, when I have a coworker who's having a really bad day and has kids at home and the kids are not doing well, how do I help? How does my team help? How do we keep the next man up philosophy, but understand we're going to be a lot more human about it right now than maybe we've ever been.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Mike, that was wonderful. And it's challenging now because we are not communicating, we're not physically together to talk through a lot of these issues and challenges that are happening in the world around us.
Right.
And even if we have kids that we're trying to teach at home because some schools are hybrid. You're learning at home or odd even days, that kind of thing. But I appreciate your comments because a community grows as we handle these challenges. How do we substitute the absence of a community, or what are ways to work through the absence of a formal work community? Or we have our distant social and neighborhoods, but how do we work through that? How would you suggest in our current situation? Where is the reprieve? Because I'm working through that myself, and
I'm lucky. I'm older. I don't have kids at home, but so many of my clients do. I think the acceptance. I had a client yesterday at 7:30 in the morning. Her daughter came in the call. guess what? Her daughter sat on the lap, and fine. Thank good for Baby Shark. Baby Shark. That played right in and was perfect. You know what? And so that idea that, one sense of community is to accept. And then the other one is, how do we, right at the beginning of this, remember all the Zoom happy hours?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing as many of those. I think part of it is we're attempting to get out more. We are social beings. We have to be social to some degree. I'm not saying go out and go to a rave or, hang out with 500 of your closest friends, but, if you can get out to a park even, and social distance, I think that's helpful. I think we almost have to be our own therapist, if that makes any sense. And how do we create a safe place for ourselves, for our kids? I mean, I honestly think anybody right now that has kids at home is my hero. If you have kids at home and I'm working with you, you tell me what you need and I'll flex around it. Like yesterday, she was embarrassed. I said, why? Oh my God, whatever you need to do to make her, feel involved and not feel like mom's pushing her away, do it.
Yeah.
She's around a lot longer than I am in terms of your life.
So yeah, I think we're becoming a lot more accepting of who we are in the space we're in and the roles we have to play. And before, it was a little bit more formal. We left our house, we went to another facility, and we spent a good chunk of our day there before we came back, and then we put on our social uniform.
Right.
But now it's a hybrid of that. And Mike, I appreciate your comments. It kind of, I think it's helpful for people, regardless of their position in the company, if they are public, private, entrepreneur, to really get comfortable with who they are and how to address a lot of the activity going on in our respective worlds.
And
I agree.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Allison.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we've had to show a lot of grace to other people, grace to ourselves. I do have kids at home, and it's been really interesting. They've been on calls with the MBA students as I'm having Zoom calls with them, and it's distracting at times, but it's also, I think in some ways it's a real blessing that my students are getting a sense of just who I am as a whole person and not just my work self, and vice versa as well. So I think we're all kind of just interacting with each other on a very different level than before. So I'm actually really loving seeing everyone's whole selves on Zoom calls with work. So I'm excited to see kind of how this continues and how it changes the workplace.
And you know what I think is interesting about this, Cynthia, is I'm sorry, Allison, and Cynthia. I mean, this is some of the core work you've been doing. Is the realization that if you're looking to manage up, now is the time to be communicating down. I don't know if any of you have ever. One of the last teams I managed was 4 millennial women, and let me tell you something. They were the best team I ever managed, but I had to make sure they understood what was going on. It wasn't that they couldn't understand it. They had to buy in. And there's a difference between understanding and buy-in. And boy, did I learn that lesson fast. But the minute that team had buy-in, it was stand back, get out of their way, they would crank. And, I think there's some of this now. We're being asked by the pandemic to be more human, which means we have to explain things more. We have to be more accepting of where people are. But there's extra work in managing down. But I think there's extra rewards in doing it too.
I agree. And I read an article, not this book, but it connects to, being decisive amid uncertainty. And there's a lot of research now, we're 8-9 months out of pandemic. And there's a lot of research that says that the group the pandemic is most adversely affecting is women. That even as successful as we are, as many opportunities as we have, the home life always fell to us, and we had services, we had other help options, what have you. Now we're inside. We're still rearing the children. We're still making the meals. We're still keeping up with the house. And we're also trying to, meet our our desires professionally. And the article went on and talked about how, if you talk to women who are actually really happy right now, or as happy as we all could be, it's because they feel like their partner or their family is equally helping them and the work is equally proportional. But I had someone reach out to me this week and told me that they were going to take a step back in their career because the mandate of kids and house, they couldn't meet it. And I think, Mike and Harold and Allison, to all of your points, we have to be empathetic and show grace, and also understand that, when we wrote those job descriptions, however many moons ago, and we envisioned those perfect people, then we were going to be perfect as well. One, there are no perfect people. And two, we're all different now. And we don't know, we live in this world of we're going to go back to normal. And Harold, you and I have talked about this. We've never gone back to September 10th.
Right.
We've always lived after September 11th. And we will have more normalcy, but we don't know the stress impact of this on people. Will people have PTSD about leaving their homes and going into the office? As we're going to lead through this uncertainty, I don't think that once there's a certain level of science in the backdrop of COVID, that all this uncertainty ends. I think if anything, it's going to be a constant. As they say, when you're a leader, you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that this will go for quite a period of time, because it's part of who we are now. It's part of our makeup. But that connects to, success through discipline. Discipline through freedom. And when I was reading this, I thought, freedom for who? Because in some of the platitudes that the author gives us, Jocko talks about, being strong but not aggressive, being quiet but not silent, that you're approachable but you're not weak. One that I've always been fond of is, don't confuse kindness with weakness. Now, Harold, when I think about this, if I'm a diverse candidate or a diverse leader, right? So I put my DE&I hat on. Maybe in my culture, being strong looks aggressive in another culture. How do you kind of square those two areas?
Yeah, that can be a challenge, especially from a cultural perspective. From a DE&I perspective, that can be a challenge. If I am trying to get into the company by, to be hired, I have to be very disciplined in my delivery. I have to be very clear with my explanation and definition of who I am and the role that I play. And even after being hired, I have to demonstrate that same discipline to demonstrate we're good. Here's how you approach me so that we can kind of get a rhythm going. And it's all about that rhythm, that crocodile memory, that approach, so that if there is a challenge, there's not a lot of searching or head scratching on how should I tell Harold he kind of screwed that up, or how can I get more from Harold? Instead, we've got a history of, through the discipline that I've presented, here's how we can move forward. The other thing to this is kind of the reverse of that. If I demonstrate the structure in which I work, that's easily adaptable to the company that I work with, so that can adapt to that culture. Because we want to make certain that happens as quickly as possible to reduce any friction and to increase the output. But at the same time, the company needs to be flexible in being very clear and very patient in explaining what their culture is and what their expectations are. And together, that blend should be very successful. But again, from a DE&I perspective, many diverse candidates feel even more of an obligation to be disciplined, to ensure that people are comfortable with them being there. I'll be the same way each and every day, so that as you approach me, as our conversations become more engaging, I'm constant. You know who I am, you know how I respond, you know how I react, so that over time, there's comfort. So in my head, that discipline is the swizzle stick in the drink that makes everything go smoothly. So my thoughts.
Mike, you were sharing in a conversation, that you had a client that had a really, let's say, inopportune experience. And a lot of that was based on kind of her cultural norms. And this comes back to, the discipline equals freedom, right?
Right.
I'm going to be silent, but I'm not going to be passive. As leaders, how do we juggle that? How do we lean into that understanding?
I think the story we were talking about just now, it was someone who, because of a very abrupt business decision in a company, she was let go. And this is someone on a visa with a very short period of time to find work. She's extremely polite. She's very soft spoken. I wouldn't say shy, but she comes across that way. And she had a very short period of time to find a job. I spoke with her last night. She had signed an offer letter and she had 3 other opportunities, literally 3 other job offers. What she did was the basics, the KPI I gave you earlier about making contact. She was religious about that. And I would love to say that as her coach that I guided her through every point, but we talked about the master plan that we put together. She executed it beautifully. It got to the point where the fact that she knew she needed a certain volume of dialogue, the fact that she knew and had a plan of how she was going to share her stories, and that she was going to probe and understand the culture and the mission of the company and how her role fit into that, made all the difference. So what it did was, by having enough of an outline, having enough of a framework, and I think framework's a really good word here, that framework gives you freedom, because that framework means you can really pay attention now. You're not having to, oh, what do I do next? Oh, what do I do next? There's a series of learning methods where you want to go from being completely unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent. In other words, it becomes such a part of you that you can focus on mastery versus, did I say that right? Getting that framework in place in your career, in your job search and beyond. That's a lot of what I think they're talking about in this book. That's where they use the word discipline. I'll use framework. It sounds a little bit less military.
I love it. I love it. Allison, when you're, thinking about how people are successful and that discipline equals freedom, right? It does have a very rigorous military sound to it. You're right, Mike. It does, which makes sense. I mean, this book was written by a military leader. Mike and Harold have talked about, staying consistent, being true to the message. If you're currently a leader, being true to that organization's message, being disciplined in what people expect of you. But when you get someone into a program at Ohio State and they're unsure, how do you put these tenets in play for them so that they can have success?
Yeah, I see this literally every day, because the MBA students, they come into the program, and it's a huge adjustment to start that very intense program. And at the same exact time, recruiters are already starting to talk to them. Our first career fair is the second week of school. And internship applications are happening throughout September, October. So it's very, 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 very quick. So the discipline, having some sort of framework, something in place is absolutely essential. Otherwise, they're going to end up coming to see me in November, December, not having done anything, or just feeling so overwhelmed that they get caught in inaction because they don't know what action to take. So it's absolutely essential. And that's really, I think, if you boil down to all the different attributes that make an MBA student successful or not, it's discipline. It's being able to set a goal and implement that goal time after time, whether it's how many networking calls they're going to make, how many applications they're going to send out. It's just keeping that momentum going. So to advise them on that, I help them set a plan and then talk through what are going to be the barriers in executing this, what's going to get in your way. Because if you don't have those kind of contingency plans, then it's hard to establish that discipline, because you can get thrown off very easily.
I love it. It ties into, everything we've talked about so far, right? Being consistent, being simple, not that you're simple, but keeping the message simple, being coherent, being disciplined so that people understand what they're expecting of you and that you're consistent every single time. So when we kind of close out this book, right, and it was nice that it was segmented into 3 pieces that we could kind of digest and think our way through, what's our call to action here? Any takeaways from a job seeker perspective, from anyone who's looking to maybe progress in a level of their career, anything that stands out as, we should really drop a pin in this and make sure we keep it in our minds going forward?
I think there's a couple, the ones that really stood out to me were communication. We talked about that a lot today. How do you effectively communicate up? How do you effectively communicate down? But there's also left and right. There's to the right side of your peers, to the left side of the external, your customers, your internal clients, whatever that is. Learning how to manage your communication is the key to a career, period. That's the core. And then really being able to build frameworks / discipline throughout your career to do the work you do well, the expectations you have for your team, their framework, and then, there's nothing wrong with having a framework of communication and expectations with your leadership team too. So I think those were really my takeaways.
And building on what Mike is saying, I think I would add to it that there's a chapter on cover, and that's using other people within the department, within your area to assist in a project. So, and also key to that is keeping it simple. I want you to do this thing. Don't get it all confusing and wrapped around the axle. I want you to do this, cover me on this, and then you get that collaboration, you get the partnership, you get the assistance you need to be successful in delivering whatever that payload is. So I agree with what Mike is saying, and then I would add the cover and the very simple communication.
Allison, anything that you think of should be really kind of, held on to from this book?
Yeah, I think just the idea of you have to always keep your mission in mind. What is that end goal? So you have to first be very clear about kind of yourself and what your goal is, what's important to you, and then you just execute that plan, because there will never be enough time to do everything that you want to do. So you have to be very deliberate about making time for the things that are going to make the most impact to help you get to that goal. And if you can do that and do that well and do that consistently, you're going to see success.
I love it. I think we've had a great time reading this and kind of going through the pieces. I'll say this, as a team, we've discussed it. Jocko, if you see this video, we would love to have you join and discuss this book in further detail and help us have a greater understanding. We're going to be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to have a fireside chat. So we're going to talk about, in combination, what we learned from Pitch Anything and Extreme Ownership. As always, we love to have your comments. We love to have your feedback. And then we'll talk about the book that we're going to be teeing up next. I know that these are sensitive conversations, and if there's anything you want to talk about outside of the presentation, the 4 of us are happy to connect on LinkedIn, email, correspond, etc. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you don't know it already, I'm sure you do, please vote November 3rd. Very important. And we'll be back next week. Thank you so much.